In the deep darkness of New Zealand's ancient forests, where mist clings to moss-covered trees and the night air carries the scent of damp earth and ferns, there exists a bird so extraordinary, so improbable that it seems conjured from myth rather than evolution. The Kakapo, a parrot that cannot fly, a bird that walks the forest floor like a feathered ghost, emerges only after sunset. Weighing up to 4 kilograms, it is the heaviest parrot on Earth. Its plumage, a tapestry of olive green and yellow, mottled with black and brown, creates perfect camouflage against the forest floor. When danger approaches, the Kakapo freezes, trusting its cryptic coloration to render it invisible. A strategy that served it well for millions of years, until new predators arrived that hunted by scent rather than sight. Kakapo's face is distinctly owl-like, with large forward-facing eyes adapted for nocturnal vision and sensitive facial feathers that act as whiskers, helping it navigate in complete darkness. Its beak is powerful yet delicate, capable of crushing the toughest seeds and stripping the most fibrous plants with surgical precision. But perhaps most remarkable is its scent, a sweet, musty aroma described as a mixture of honey and flowers, an evolutionary quirk that would later become a liability. This is not merely a bird. This is a living relic, a survivor from a lost world, a creature that evolved in isolation for 80 million years on islands without mammalian predators. The Kakapo represents one of the most dramatic conservation stories ever told, a species that teetered on the very brink of extinction, with fewer than 50 individuals remaining, and was pulled back through extraordinary human effort, dedication, and an unwavering refusal to let this ancient lineage disappear forever. Long before humans arrived in New Zealand, the Kakapo thrived across both main islands and many smaller offshore islands. They inhabited a range of forest types, from coastal to alpine, wherever there was sufficient food and suitable habitat. In this predator-free paradise, the Kakapo had no need for flight. Evolution favored energy conservation. Why waste precious calories on powerful flight muscles when food was abundant on the ground and in low vegetation? Over countless generations, the Kakapo's wings became vestigial, useful only for balance and controlled descents from trees. Its legs grew strong and muscular, perfect for climbing steep slopes and navigating dense undergrowth. Its metabolism slowed, allowing it to survive on low-quality forage during lean times. The Kakapo became a master of efficiency, a bird perfectly adapted to a world without threats. But this specialization would prove nearly fatal. When Polynesian settlers arrived around 700 years ago, they brought rats, the first mammalian predators New Zealand had ever known. The Kakapo's freeze response, so effective against visual hunters like the extinct Haast's eagle, was useless against creatures that hunted by smell. European colonization in the 19th century brought even more devastating predators, stoats, ferrets, cats, and more rats. These efficient killers decimated Kakapo populations. Adults were killed on their nests. Eggs and chicks were devoured. Habitat was cleared for farming and logging. By the early 20th century, the Kakapo had vanished from the mainland. A few scattered populations clung to existence on remote islands, but even these were under siege. By the 1970s, scientists feared the Kakapo was functionally extinct. Then in 1977, a small population was discovered on Stewart Island. Hope flickered, but that hope was tempered by a devastating realization. The population consisted almost entirely of males. Stoats had reached Stewart Island and were systematically killing females on their nests. The species was still sliding toward oblivion. The Kakapo's breeding system is unlike almost any other bird. Males do not form pair bonds. They do not help raise chicks. Instead, they engage in a spectacular, exhausting display known as lekking. During the breeding season, which occurs only when certain native trees produce heavy fruit crops, sometimes just once every 2 to 5 years, males travel to traditional display grounds, often the same sites used for generations. Here, each male excavates a bowl-shaped depression in the ground, sometimes several of them connected by tracks he meticulously maintains, clearing away debris and vegetation. These bowls act as natural amplifiers. Positioned on ridges or hilltops where sound carries farthest, the male settles into his bowl as darkness falls and begins one of nature's most extraordinary performances. He inflates a thoracic air sac, a unique adaptation among parrots, until his entire chest swells like a balloon. Then he releases the air in a series of deep, resonant booms that reverberate through the forest. Each boom is low frequency, around 30 hertz, felt as much as heard, carrying for up to 5 kilometers through the still night air. The male booms continuously, sometimes for 8 hours without pause, inhaling deeply between sequences. Boom, 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 boom. 20 to 30 booms in succession, followed by a high-pitched metallic ching sound as he expels the last of the air. Then he begins again. Night after night, week after week, sometimes for 3 or 4 months, he booms, calling to females that may be kilometers away. This is not mere sound. This is advertisement, competition, desperation, and hope compressed into acoustic waves. The energy expenditure is phenomenal. Males can lose significant body weight during the breeding season, pouring every calorie into their booming displays. They barely eat, focused entirely on attracting a mate. Females, hearing the booms, travel through the forest to investigate. They may visit multiple males, comparing the quality of their displays, the locations of their bowls, and their physical condition. The female makes the choice. If she selects a male, mating occurs quickly and she departs immediately. The male resumes booming, hoping to attract additional females. He provides nothing beyond his genes. No nest, no food, no protection, no parental care whatsoever. The female is entirely on her own. After mating, the female Kakapo faces the monumental task of raising her chicks alone. She searches for a suitable nesting site, often a hollow tree, a cavity beneath roots, or a sheltered space among rocks. She may travel considerable distances from the male's booming ground, seeking safety and proximity to food. The nest itself is simple, a shallow scrape lined with chewed wood and plant material. She lays 1 to 4 eggs, typically 2, large and white. For the next 30 days, she incubates them, leaving only briefly to feed. During this time, she is extraordinarily vulnerable. Sitting motionless in her nest, her sweet scent wafting through the forest, she is an easy target for any predator that catches her trail. This is where stoats and cats inflicted their most devastating damage, killing incubating females and destroying entire breeding attempts. When the chicks hatch, they are covered in pale gray down, eyes closed, completely helpless. The female must now feed both herself and her growing chicks. She leaves the nest at night to forage, sometimes traveling hundreds of meters, filling her crop with nutritious plant material, fruits, seeds, and leaves. She returns before dawn, regurgitates the food for her chicks, and settles over them to provide warmth. This pattern continues for weeks. The chicks grow slowly, far more slowly than most birds. Kakapo have one of the longest development periods of any parrot. Chicks remain in the nest for 10 to 12 weeks, and even after fledging, they stay with their mother for several more months, learning which plants are edible, how to navigate the forest, and how to avoid danger. This extended parental care, combined with infrequent breeding, means Kakapo have an extremely low reproductive rate. A female might successfully raise only 4 or 5 chicks in her entire lifetime. For a species under pressure, this is a catastrophic limitation. There is no capacity for rapid population recovery. Every chick matters. Every breeding season is critical. One bad year, one predator incursion, one storm that destroys food supplies, and years of progress can be erased. By 1989, the situation was desperate. Only 43 Kakapo remained, scattered across 3 small islands. Extinction seemed inevitable, but a dedicated team of conservationists refused to accept defeat. They launched one of the most intensive species recovery programs ever attempted. Every single Kakapo was caught, examined, fitted with a radio transmitter, and given a name. From that moment forward, each bird would be monitored continuously. Their movements tracked, their health assessed, their breeding attempts managed with unprecedented precision. The first priority was predator control. The remaining Kakapo were moved to predator-free islands, sanctuaries where intensive trapping, poisoning, and monitoring ensured that not a single rat, stoat, or cat could establish a foothold. These islands became fortresses, patrolled constantly, with biosecurity protocols stricter than many international borders. Next came supplementary feeding. Because Kakapo only breed in years when specific native trees produce heavy fruit crops, breeding opportunities were rare and unpredictable. Scientists began providing supplementary food, specially formulated pellets rich in nutrients, to ensure females had the energy reserves needed for egg production and chick rearing. Feeders were installed throughout the islands, monitored by cameras and scales that recorded which birds visited and how much they ate. This allowed managers to adjust food supplies individually, ensuring every bird received optimal nutrition. Perhaps most remarkably, every single Kakapo nest was monitored intensively. When a female began nesting, a remote camera was installed, allowing staff to watch without disturbance. Temperature probes tracked incubation conditions. If a female left her nest for too long, if temperatures dropped, if eggs were infertile or chicks were struggling, staff could intervene. Infertile eggs were removed to encourage relaying. Weak chicks were taken into temporary care, hand-fed and warmed, then returned to their mothers. In cases where a female had more chicks than she could adequately feed, excess chicks were hand-raised or fostered to other females. Every decision was carefully calculated, balancing the risks of intervention against the risks of losing precious chicks. Kākāpō's diet is remarkably specialized and varied, reflecting the diverse plant communities of New Zealand's forests. They are entirely herbivorous, feeding on a wide range of native plants, each selected for specific nutritional properties. They consume the leaves, stems, roots, fruits, seeds, bark, and sap of dozens of plant species. One of their favorite foods is the fruit of the rimu tree, a podocarp that produces heavy crops irregularly, sometimes only once every 4 or 5 years. These massed fruiting events trigger Kakapo breeding, providing the energy females need for egg production. The Kakapo's feeding technique is distinctive. Rather than simply biting off leaves, they chew plant material thoroughly, extracting the nutritious juices and leaving behind characteristic bundles of fibrous material called chews. These chews litter the forest floor wherever Kakapo have been feeding, small piles of masticated plant fiber, evidence of their passage. They are selective feeders, choosing the most nutritious parts of each plant, the growing tips, the young leaves, the ripest fruits. This selectivity is crucial because much of their diet is relatively low in nutrients. They must consume large quantities to meet their energy needs, spending much of the night foraging. Their powerful beak allows them to access foods unavailable to other birds. They can crack the toughest seeds, strip bark from branches, and dig up roots and tubers. They climb trees with surprising agility, using their beak and strong claws to ascend trunks and navigate branches, reaching fruits and flowers high above the ground. When descending, they use their vestigial wings to parachute down, controlling their fall and landing with a soft thump. In captivity and on managed islands, supplementary food has become essential. The specially formulated pellets provide concentrated nutrition, ensuring females enter the breeding season in prime condition. This supplementary feeding has dramatically increased breeding success, allowing females to produce more eggs and raise healthier chicks. But it is a double-edged sword. The Kakapo is becoming dependent on human intervention, losing some of its natural foraging behavior. Managers must balance the immediate need to boost population numbers with the long-term goal of creating self-sustaining populations that can survive without constant human support. One of the most insidious threats facing the Kakapo is disease. With such a small population, genetic diversity is extremely limited. This makes the species vulnerable to pathogens that could sweep through and devastate the population. Aspergillosis, a fungal infection, has killed several Kakapo. Respiratory infections, parasites, and other diseases are constant concerns. Every bird is monitored closely for signs of illness. Regular health checks, blood tests, and physical examinations ensure problems are caught early. Sick birds receive immediate veterinary care, often involving antibiotics, antifungals, or other treatments. The small population also means that genetic management is crucial. With so few individuals, inbreeding is inevitable. Some Kakapo alive today are more closely related than siblings. This inbreeding reduces genetic diversity, increases the risk of genetic disorders, and can reduce fertility and chick survival. To combat this, managers use genetic analysis to guide breeding decisions. They identify which males and females should breed to maximize genetic diversity. In some cases, they use artificial insemination, collecting semen from genetically valuable males and inseminating females to ensure those genes are passed on. They even manipulate which eggs are allowed to hatch. If a female lays multiple eggs fertilized by the same male, and that male is overrepresented in the population, managers may remove some eggs and replace them with eggs from more genetically valuable pairings. It is an extraordinary level of intervention, micromanaging reproduction at the individual level, but it is necessary to maintain the genetic health of the population. Every breeding season is a carefully orchestrated operation involving dozens of people, cutting-edge technology, and round-the-clock monitoring. It is exhausting, expensive, and absolutely essential. The Kakapo's nocturnal lifestyle is an adaptation to New Zealand's unique evolutionary history. In the absence of mammalian predators, many native birds became nocturnal or crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk. This allowed them to avoid the few avian predators that existed, primarily the extinct Haast's eagle and the New Zealand falcon. The Kakapo's large eyes are adapted for low light conditions, with a high density of rod cells that maximize light capture. Their facial feathers, similar to the facial discs of owls, help channel sound to their ears, enhancing their hearing. They navigate through dense forest in complete darkness, using a combination of vision, hearing, touch, and memory. They establish regular pathways through their territories, tracks they use night after night, learning the location of every obstacle, every food source, every potential danger. Their sense of smell is well developed, unusual for birds, allowing them to locate food and possibly to recognize other individuals. But their own strong scent, that sweet, musty aroma, betrays them to predators. Stoats and cats can follow a Kākāpō's scent trail directly to the bird or its nest. This is why predator-free islands are absolutely essential. On islands where even a single stoat could spell disaster, biosecurity is paramount. Every boat, every piece of equipment, every bag of supplies is inspected meticulously before being allowed onto the islands. Dogs trained to detect rodents patrol regularly. Traps and bait stations form multiple lines of defense. The cost is enormous, but the alternative is unthinkable. The Kākāpō's nocturnality also affects their social behavior. They are largely solitary, each bird maintaining a home range that may overlap with others, but with minimal direct interaction outside the breeding season. Males, in particular, are territorial around their booming sites, defending these prime locations from rivals. Confrontations are rare but can be intense, involving loud calls, posturing, and occasionally physical combat. Females are more tolerant of each other, their ranges overlapping more extensively, but they too maintain a degree of spacing. This solitary lifestyle means that Kākāpō density is naturally low. Even in optimal habitat, there might be only a few birds per square kilometer. This low density made them difficult to find historically and contributed to the delayed recognition of their decline. The human connection to the Kākāpō is deep and complex. To the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, the Kakapo was known as Tarapo or Kakapo, a bird valued for its meat and feathers. Kakapo feathers were used to make cloaks for chiefs, prized for their softness and beauty. Maori hunted Kakapo, but their impact was limited by their small population and the Kakapo's remote habitat. It was the arrival of European settlers and their introduced predators that triggered the catastrophic decline. Early European naturalists were fascinated by the Kakapo. Specimens were collected and sent to museums around the world. Some were even kept as pets, described as gentle, curious, and affectionate. But as the species declined, concern grew. By the late 19th century, scientists recognized that the Kakapo was in serious trouble. Early conservation efforts were hampered by limited knowledge and resources. Some Kakapo were translocated to islands, but without effective predator control, these efforts largely failed. It was not until the late 20th century, with the advent of modern conservation techniques, that real progress began. Today, the Kakapo has become an icon of conservation, a symbol of both the fragility of island ecosystems and the power of dedicated human intervention. The recovery program has inspired similar efforts for other critically endangered species around the world. It has demonstrated that even when a species is reduced to a handful of individuals, extinction is not inevitable. With sufficient resources, expertise, and determination, recovery is possible. But the Kakapo also highlights the immense cost of such efforts. The program requires millions of dollars annually, a large, dedicated team, and continuous intensive management. It raises difficult questions about conservation priorities. Should so much effort and money be devoted to a single species when countless others are also in need? There are no easy answers, but for those who work with Kakapo, the question is moot. Every individual bird has a name, a personality, a story. They are not abstract representatives of a species. They are unique beings, and their survival matters. As of 2023, the Kakapo population has grown to over 200 birds, a remarkable achievement from the low of 43 in 1995. This growth has not been linear or easy. There have been setbacks, disease outbreaks, poor breeding seasons, and individual tragedies, but the overall trajectory is positive. New chicks hatch each breeding season. Genetic diversity is being carefully managed. The population is slowly becoming more robust, but significant challenges remain. The Kakapo is still entirely dependent on intensive management. They cannot survive without predator control, supplementary feeding, and nest monitoring. The goal is to establish multiple self-sustaining populations on different islands, providing insurance against catastrophe. If disease strikes one island, others will survive. If a predator incursion occurs, the damage will be contained. Managers are also exploring the possibility of using gene editing and other advanced technologies to address the genetic bottleneck. Could genetic material from museum specimens be used to increase diversity? Could genes associated with disease resistance be enhanced? These are controversial questions, pushing the boundaries of conservation ethics, but they may become necessary as the climate changes and new threats emerge. Climate change poses a significant risk to the Kakapo. Changes in temperature and rainfall patterns could affect the fruiting cycles of native plants, disrupting the Kakapo's breeding patterns. More frequent and severe storms could damage habitat and destroy nests. Rising sea levels could inundate some of the low-lying islands used as sanctuaries. The Kakapo recovery program must adapt continuously, anticipating and responding to these emerging threats. This requires long-term funding, political support, and public engagement. The Kakapo's story is ultimately a human story. It is a story of our capacity for destruction, our carelessness in introducing predators and clearing habitat, our failure to recognize the consequences of our actions until it was almost too late. But it is also a story of our capacity for redemption, our ability to recognize mistakes, to dedicate ourselves to making amends, to pour resources and effort into saving a species from extinction. The people who work on the Kakapo recovery program are extraordinary. They spend months at a time on remote islands, living in basic huts, enduring harsh weather, working long hours in difficult conditions. They monitor birds through the night, climb steep slopes in the dark, and respond to emergencies at a moment's notice. They celebrate every egg laid, every chick hatched, every bird that survives another year. They mourn every loss, every bird that dies from disease or accident, every nest that fails. They know each Kakapo individually, recognize their calls, their personalities, their quirks. They form deep bonds with these birds, bonds that sustain them through the hardships of the work. The Kakapo has also captured the public imagination. Social media accounts share updates on individual birds, their breeding attempts, their health, their adventures. People around the world follow the lives of Kakapo like celebrities, cheering their successes and mourning their setbacks. This public engagement has been crucial in maintaining funding and support for the recovery program. It has also raised awareness of the broader conservation challenges facing New Zealand and island ecosystems worldwide. The Kakapo serves as an ambassador, a charismatic representative of the thousands of less visible species that are also struggling to survive. What can we learn from the Kakapo? First, that island ecosystems are extraordinarily vulnerable. Species that evolve in isolation without predators often lack the defenses needed to survive when those predators are introduced. We must be vigilant about biosecurity, preventing the introduction of invasive species to vulnerable islands. Second, that early intervention is crucial. By the time the Kakapo's plight was fully recognized, the species was on the brink. If action had been taken earlier, the recovery would have been easier and less costly. We must monitor species populations continuously, recognizing declines before they become catastrophic. Third, that intensive management can work. The Kakapo recovery program demonstrates that even critically endangered species can be brought back from the edge. But it also shows that such efforts require enormous resources, expertise, and long-term commitment. We cannot rely on heroic last-minute interventions for every species. Prevention is always better than cure. Fourth, that genetic diversity matters. The Kakapo's genetic bottleneck will affect the species for generations. Maintaining large, healthy populations is essential to preserving genetic diversity and evolutionary potential. Fifth, that public engagement is powerful. The Kakapo's popularity has generated support and funding that might not otherwise have been available. Connecting people emotionally to conservation efforts can make the difference between success and failure. Finally, that hope matters. The Kakapo's story could easily have ended in extinction. Instead, it is a story of survival, resilience, and the refusal to give up. In a world facing biodiversity loss on an unprecedented scale, the Kakapo reminds us that individual species, individual lives matter. That we have the knowledge, the tools, and the capacity to make a difference. That even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, recovery is possible. The future of the Kakapo remains uncertain. The species is still critically endangered, still entirely dependent on human support. But for the first time in over a century, there is genuine hope. The population is growing. Genetic diversity is being managed. New technologies offer potential solutions to emerging challenges. And a dedicated community of scientists, conservationists, and supporters remains committed to ensuring the Kakapo's survival. In the deep darkness of New Zealand's forests, Where ancient trees stand draped in moss and the night air carries the scent of earth and ferns, the Kākāpō still walks, still climbs, still booms into the darkness, calling across the valleys, advertising its presence, seeking connection. It is a sound that almost vanished from the earth forever, silenced by our actions. But it endures, a testament to the resilience of life and to our capacity when we choose to be guardians rather than destroyers. The Kākāpō is more than a bird. It is a responsibility, a challenge, and an inspiration. Its survival depends on us, on our willingness to protect habitat, control predators, fund conservation programs, and care about the fate of a species that offers us nothing material, only the knowledge that we share this planet with something ancient, unique, and irreplaceable. To see a Kākāpō is to glimpse a world that existed before humans, a world we nearly destroyed, and a world we are now fighting to preserve. Every Kākāpō alive today carries within it millions of years of evolutionary history, a lineage stretching back to the age of dinosaurs. When we save the Kākāpō, we save more than a species. We save a connection to deep time, a reminder of where we came from and what we stand to lose. The Kākāpō's story is not yet finished. New chapters are being written every breeding season, every time a chick hatches, every time a young bird learns to forage and navigate the forest. These chapters are written by dedicated people who believe that every species deserves a chance, that extinction is not inevitable, and that we have a moral obligation to protect the extraordinary diversity of life on Earth. The Kākāpō endures because people refuse to let it disappear. Because they believed that a flightless nocturnal parrot that smells like flowers and booms into the darkness deserves to exist. Not for any utilitarian reason, but simply because it is remarkable, because it is unique, because it is here. In protecting the Kākāpō, we protect something essential in ourselves, our capacity for compassion, our sense of responsibility, our connection to the natural world. The Kākāpō's survival is our survival, a measure of our willingness to coexist with other species, to make space for them, to value them not for what they provide us, but for what they are. As long as the Kākāpō walks the forest floor, climbs the ancient trees, and booms into the night, there is hope. Hope that we can repair the damage we have done. Hope that we can learn from our mistakes. Hope that future generations will inherit a world still rich with the diversity of life, still home to creatures as extraordinary and improbable as a parrot that cannot fly, a bird that evolved in isolation for millions of years, a survivor that refused to vanish. The Kākāpō is a miracle of evolution and a triumph of conservation. Its story reminds us that every species lost is a tragedy, and every species saved is a victory. In the end, the Kākāpō's fate reflects our own choices, our priorities, our values. Will we be the generation that allowed this ancient lineage to disappear, or will we be the generation that ensured its survival? The answer lies not in the forest, but in our hearts and our actions. The Kākāpō waits, booming into the darkness, trusting that we will answer its call.